Brian, you blame yourself.
I blame myself.
Oh, dear.
Hands up. I really have to apologise on national
What
radio.
have you done?
I voted leave in 2016.
Wow.
I was under the impression that we had a bunch of grown-ups in Parliament and they would make sensible decisions. All the talk at the time was of a very close alignment. Personally, I hope for an EEA type alignment. I think one of your fellow presenters called it Norway too at the time. I'm just absolutely disgusted how the whole issue has just been hijacked and it's just run completely out of control.
So you feel that you were sold a false version of Brexit, do you?
Absolutely. The benefits that I saw were perhaps more or greater sovereignty for the UK Parliament. I think we now have a sovereign Parliament and a minority government. Wants to make sure that the sovereignty of the British courts was supreme, and the recent Supreme Court judgment and the way they have acted like grown-ups and sensible people in the midst of all this madness, that's not that reason for voting leave out of the window as well.
So what do you want to happen?
I think after 3.5 years of all this talk, hot air, lies and counter-lies, I think I'm probably more informed now than I was 3.5 years ago. Put the deal to us again. We can make an informed choice this time.
Which deal? Theresa May's deal?
It's going to sound
Boris
strange,
Johnson's
somebody
version?
coming on LBC and saying that something that Jeremy Corbyn and Labour had proposed might actually be sensible. I would like to see a realistic, less harmful version of Brexit offered up against Remain. And I'd like a grown-up discussion and
how might you vote then, Brian, if you were faced with, you've got your new information and you're faced, in this scenario that you're describing, you're faced with a so-called soft Brexit in which we probably remain in the customs union and the single market, but remove ourselves from other political institutions in the European Union. I mean, there's a crossover, obviously, if you stay that closely aligned economically, but would you still vote leave then?
No. I don't think any sensible person. 17.4 million people are not hell-bent on a disastrous self-harm Brexit. I can't believe that. I'm sure a lot of people have got justifiable reasons for themselves why they want to go for it. I think, and I've got no evidence to back this up, except the fear I see on people's faces and when I talk to them about what could actually happen. I never thought it'd come to this. Turn the clock back, I would change my vote.
It's interesting that, because if it's more likely, as things stand anyway, it's more likely that we'll have a general election, Brian, than a second referendum. And Boris Johnson's government, what will he be relying on? He'll be relying on people who voted leave last time, because they've clearly thrown the Remain baby out with the bathwater, haven't they? They're not chasing any Remain votes. They're hoping that the Remain vote in a general election is sufficiently split, and their publicly announced version of Brexit that they can't deliver will see off the Brexit party so they'll win a majority. That's clearly their thinking in a general election. But if there are enough people like you who voted to leave but regret it, then it's not as clear that majority for Boris Johnson as it might look on paper, is it?
I would guess that many Brexit party supporters would vote for a, quote, clean break Brexit. But an awful lot of people who voted in the referendum 3.5 years ago would probably think again and wonder whether it would all be worth it, now that we know the likelihood of the impacts upon people, the livelihoods, the future of this country. I think we'd have a much more informed decision and a much more grown-up debate.
Well,
there will be extremists on both sides.
Well, no, don't use the word extremists about people how they vote, because unless you're voting for some, genuinely violent right-wing nut, you're not an extremist, are you? or left-wing nut, for that matter. A wing nut. And Brian, tell me this, given that we're likely to get a general election before a referendum, as I said, who are you going to vote for in the general election? Who do you normally vote for?
I was a member of the Labour Party until about 20 years ago. I still, my heart and head would go with the programme that Labour are proposing. And I'd probably vote Labour. With the promise of the referendum is the key thing for me. If we have an informed discussion, informed debate, then I think the final outcome, whichever way it goes, will be more valid.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Really thoughtful call from Brian in South Norwood.